Des Moines Waterworks Board of Trustee meeting, December 20th at 3:30 p.m. The first item would be the consent agenda. Do I hear a motion to accept the consent agenda?
So moved. So moved. Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Item 2, we have public comment period. At this time, anyone on any subject has 5 minutes to speak to the board. Yes, we have no one, so we'll go to item 3, the action items. Item A, proposed 2012 schedule of board waterworks trustees meetings and committee meetings.
Yes, we provided a listing of the dates for the fourth Tuesday of each month up through December, in which case we thought we probably want to stay closed on Christmas Day, so we're there on the third Tuesday in December. And then the proposed first and second Tuesday committee meeting list is there as well. So if anyone knows of conflicts that you'd like to propose, any alternate dates, we can take that into consideration today at this time.
Are we avoiding spring break? I'm assuming we are, because I know we have a lot of staff folks that, have kids that are out that week, and it's a great vacation.
The prior week
It's
appears
the prior
to be
week. Okay,
spring
good.
break.
Okay. Do I hear a motion?
Move.
Second.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item B, water treatment chemicals.
Yes, this is a significant list and a significant award that we do each year. We took an extra month this year because we had a new lime bidder for the first time in a long time. Western Lime bid the lime feed for the Moines treatment plant. And so we wanted to take the time to test that lime and got several loads to ensure that it would work satisfactorily at our McMullen plant site, which it did. So overall, as the summary shows, based on the unit price bids and our estimate of the amount of chemicals that we're going to use at each of the 3 treatment plants, this total, as shown on the attached sheet, comes to a little over $3.8 million. So a significant amount of chemical that we do use each year. One nice thing about it is, based on the quantities estimate, this is about $120,000 less than the comparable estimates that we saw a year ago, and roughly $180,000 less than what we had budgeted for 2012. So that's a nice advantage going into the new year. So we ask for a motion to award the 2012 contract for water treatment chemicals supplies to the low responsible bidders listed.
Do I hear a motion?
So moved. Second.
Discussion? Yes.
So did you say that we hadn't put lime out to bid for a while?
No,
did this year? Or?
We bid them each year.
We
It's just
bid
that
it, but we got a different
bidder
vendor
for the
this
first
time.
time
Okay.
in a long while.
Oh,
At
okay.
least
I
someone
see.
that was the low bidder
Yeah.
for that plant.
Okay.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Next, item C is a public hearing for the 2011 Nolan standpipe exterior painting. Excuse me. I'd like to open the public hearing for comments. Any public comments?
We've had no oral or written comments.
Okay, Randy, okay,
Close
I
the
guess we
public
close the public hearing. And could we have a motion to approve the project form of contract plan specifications and a motion to second?
I move the adoption of the form of the contract, the plans, and the specs.
Second.
And the estimated cost?
And estimated cost. Thank you.
Okay, discussion. Do No discussion.
Okay.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item B.
Okay, we need to analyze the bids. We just passed the motion for the
Skipped,
contract.
okay.
The summary sheet shows that we did receive 9 bidders on this project, which was sizable list. The low bidder is Pospisil Painting Incorporated. They and the second low bidder were very close in estimate, and then there was a pretty good range above them. So that would tend to say, we've got a very competitive bid. Pospisil has done work in the metropolitan area, and most recently for the Metropolitan WRA. Also in the contract, we had 2 alternates. One was to deduct to paint the tank with it placed out of service, as opposed to the base price, which was assuming the tank would stay in service. And then the other was to do some welding repairs. And based on the alternate bid price items, the recommendation is to include those alternates as well in the award. So our recommendation is to award the 2011 Nollan Standpipe exterior painting to Pospisil Painting Inc. in the amount of $127,739 and authorize the chairperson and the CEO general manager to execute the contract.
Do I have a motion to approve Randy's recommendations?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion.
Well, I just had a question. Do we ever, and I'm asking more of a procedural question of our group in purchasing and procurement, do we ever go back to some of these folks to make sure that they understand the specifications? When you have a vendor that's out there more than double the price of the highest bid, I'm just wondering if our documents weren't clear or just what, just in a way to ensure that we're getting as many vendors, because it's nice to see this many, but when you have one come in at $445,000 and we are awarding it to someone at $127,000, either we don't have the right list of vendors that we're sending it out to, and that's way out of their, bailiwick, or maybe it wasn't clear to them. But I often wonder when it's that far of a spread.
Sure. Well, it's hard to say how somebody reads a particular job. Some of it could be that depends on the project if they're going to get it. Like in this particular case, I'm not sure if the high bidder was a local contractor or not. But we definitely do more of an inquiry when bids come in significantly above the estimate. Then I think that's the one indication that, okay, did we miss something, or is it not a good time to be bidding a particular project if everyone is busy and full of work? So typically we don't check with those high bidders.
I will say that in this, in talking to a number of contractors, in this economy, you may see a bigger spread, because some of these contractors are willing to bid lower than they would if they had a full workload. Not that they're underbidding, but at another time, they may not be willing to take as little. And so that probably has something to do with it. And I would guess until the economy picks up, you'll see a bigger gap from time to time.
That's correct.
And to keep existing employees.
Yeah, I mean, they may have, idle hands or, or equipment, what have you, so they're willing to bid lower than they would in a better economy, so. It's not all good news. Maybe it's good news for us to come in with low bids, but.
Any other, Jim?
Yeah, have you indicated about how long it might take and when they might perform their duties in the time of year?
That'll end up being in the spring, would be my guess. I'm looking at Gary to see what feedback Pospisil may have given, but part of it, we desire to do the work before summer because we definitely would like to have that tank in service when high pumpage season hits. So somewhere, my guess is April, May, June.
Okay.
That time period.
To the point, though, that Graham made, now I'm wondering, because between the last 2 things that we've taken action on, we have $210,000 in a budget that we just passed. Would there be some other projects that we want to move ahead with the economy the way it is, to ensure that people are working. I mean, from the engineer bids, which is what went into the projects, that's 210 on 2 actions that may allow, you know, some of our folks to do some other work that they didn't think we could do in this fiscal year.
We can certainly consider that. We know that on the operating side, of which the chemicals come out of, Mid-American Energy had notified us just a month ago that of a price increase going up there that we.
So it's already spent, your savings is
So,
already spent.
part of that savings on the chemicals is
Okay.
spent, yeah.
Good.
Okay, any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item D, the 2012 water service line repairs.
Yes, this is the annual bidding for stop box repairs that we do, for which property owners choose not to do on their own or retain their own contractor. If they've got a leaking service stop box or inoperable stop box and the like. Torgerson and Goring really have alternated getting the bids. Torgerson most recently has been the successful bidder. Goring, in this case, did not submit a bid bond with their bid. This was the first year we did this through engineering and required a bid bond, and I don't know if they just overlooked that, but I believe they gave an indication to us that they would not have been the low bidder. We didn't open their bid, but they offered that piece of information after the Torgerson bid was opened. The estimate, engineer's estimate, as shown here, was $325,000. So the low bid was still below our estimate of just a little over, with a bid of a little over $301,000. 12 prospective plumbers, contractors took bids out, packages out, and just the 2 submitted. But so, and that's what we've really seen the last few years is about 2 bidders on this kind of work. So what we're asking is a motion to award this 2012 contract in the amount of $301,872 to Torgerson Excavating, and to authorize the chairperson and the CEO, general manager, to execute the contract. A good share of this cost gets reimbursed to us, paid by the property owners.
Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
A second. Okay, any discussion?
Okay, so this is when homeowners or businesses don't get their repairs made,
Correct.
because they've got to get made, so
They're
then
gonna get
that's,
made if they choose.
then our people come in. And so how many of those do we do a year?
About 1,000, is it?
Through our contract, we'll do 300 to 400.
300 to 400.
We notify about 1,000 customers, but most of them take care of it themselves.
Okay.
Oh, okay, so in a year, maybe there's 1,000 people that may have that, and 200 to 300.
300 to 400.
3 to 4 will not take care of it themselves. We do it, and then do we lien the property, or what happens?
Put it on their water bill,
That's a big surprise, $3,000.
and then they have the opportunity to make pay arrangements and pay that off over time.
Okay. Does that usually work out okay? I mean, do we get the money, or what happens?
I would say we usually get the money, yes.
Yeah, there are some that could evolve into a lien, but I don't know if we know what the percentage of that is at this point, but.
Okay.
You know, if they don't pay, ultimately their water service is terminated, so it works pretty effectively.
Mm-hmm, okay.
Did the cost per repair go up or down? About the,
They about the same deal.
It's about the same. Out of 26 items on the bidding list, we had 3 that went up slightly, and we had 1 that went down.
so it's
And the
pretty,
rest all stayed the same.
pretty stable. Interesting. Any other discussion? Yeah.
One more question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. So we hire this out to other companies, our people don't do it, right? Our people don't do this work?
That's correct.
And why is that?
It requires a licensed plumber
Okay, okay,
to do the work.
okay. That's all.
Okay. Any other? That's, okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item E, acceptance of Saylorville Water Treatment Plant Process HVAC and Electrical Systems.
Yes, this is the last large contract that was awarded to Story Construction Company out of Ames, who did just an exceptional job in completing that part of the contract. A little over $9.8 million contract, and we issued 2 change orders, as the summary sheet shows, a little over $79,000 worth of those change orders. This contract was a part of the overall Saylorville plant contract. Again, as the fiscal impact summary shows, totals $38.77 million. This project overall was funded out of purchase capacity capital monies that suburban utilities paid us up front in exchange for a lower water rate. So 100% of the cost of the treatment plant is paid for out of those purchase capacity funds. And we still have about $7 million of funds remaining over what we collected back in 2005 that we'll use to make other improvements to what's defined as the core network, either through expansion of treatment plant or ASR well construction in all likelihood. Feeder mains could also be part of that core network expansion. There's a summary sheet memo that was attached, and a couple of things that we talked about at Finance and Audit that we wanted to share today, as well as, kind of like why membranes, since our other 2 treatment plants are lime softening plants. Part of what we did through our analysis was we were beginning to see some increase in lime, the cost of lime. Lime softening still is a tremendous treatment technique, and it works well for our other 2 treatment plants. But we have seen some variability in the price of lime. Plus, we need a lot more ground space to process the lime residuals or dewater it, which is becoming expensive. And then our contractor that does take our lime residuals from the 2 treatment plants still has a small mountain to process and haul out. It's a useful product, and we don't foresee the immediate future that we need to change our treatment technique at the Fleur and the McMillan plants, but we felt that the technology was moving in the direction of membrane treatment. Plus, with the reverse osmosis portion of that membrane plant, that removes our hardness and as well as nitrates. So we don't have to have a separate nitrate train to treat like we do here at the Fleur plant. Plus, we get a little more room for meeting future regulations in the event there's some tighter regulations come down the line, or water quality changes very significantly from current, then membrane technology becomes a greater, offers us more protection. So that's the kind of the rationale as to how we ended up with membrane treatment. Forecast is for membrane treatment. Initially, looks like it'll be a little more expensive to operate on a per 1,000 gallon basis, but that's part of why we're operating the plant and getting more operating experience. And, we foresee that some amount of that cost is going to come down as our iron and manganese that are in our source water, as those levels drop. That will offer some amount of offsetting chemical costs on that treatment side. So the project has been a success. We still are waiting to do the performance testing for GE in order to make a final payment to the membrane supplier. And that should start here after the first of the year. And once they successfully pass that performance testing, then we'll make our final payment to GE, which had a separate contract. So we're bringing forward today to accept a motion to accept the last contract, the water treatment process, HVAC, and electrical systems contract with Story Construction in the amount of $9,937,645.
Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Discussion. I had one question, Randy. Do you know yet, is the electrical use on the membranes 2 or 3 times more than on the other plants, or is it close?
It's going to be a little higher, Dave, but the high service pumping is our big electrical cost at our 2 existing plants, Fluor and McMullen.
Putting the water out.
Correct. And we still have high service pumping costs at the Saylorville plant, but there is a higher cost that kind of is offset by less chemicals that we have to treat and use at that
I was
plant.
just wondering how much more, if it's twice the electrical use.
I don't know that I know that number as yet.
We'll find it out later.
Here in the spring, once we get about an hour or a year's worth of operation costs, I think we'll get a better handle on what the trending appears to be.
Okay. Any other questions?
I just think it's important, and Dave, I know you weren't at the finance meeting, but Leslie and Graham and I were there, and thank you, Randy, for giving us that overview, because from the time we started this plant until now, we've had almost a complete turnover in the board, and I think it's important for us to talk about why we're using a different method, and we just approved a $3.8 million contract for Lime. So, I mean, if Lime would double, I mean, that's going to have a definite impact on our cost to process. So thank you for doing that for all of us.
And getting rid of it, but also the energy, that's why we got it. It's good that Randy's keeping us up on this. So a year will be when?
In May, June.
And then we should be able to see some figures. That's great. Okay, ready for vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Acceptance of the 2010 Water System Improvements Contract 1.
Yes, this is a contract that Holbrook Construction was awarded back in August 2010. At the time we awarded that contract, we anticipated we were going to need some of 2011 budgeted dollars to complete it because it was going to carry over into 2011, which it did. We had 3 change orders that are shown here that were issued during the course of the project, a little over $32,000 worth. And overall, once we take this contract and add it to what we did award elsewhere in 2011, we'll end up with our 2011 water system improvements being about $64,000 over what we had budgeted. But that overage is being covered by unspent capital monies from 2011 on a number of other projects. So we're asking the board today is to accept this 2010 WSI Contract 1 completed by Holbrook Construction in the amount of $775,228.54.
Do I hear a motion?
Move.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item G, request authorization to reestablish the date of the public hearing for 2011 Moffett Reservoir.
Yes, this is the erosion control project that we had to reestablish once again because of going through the Corps of Engineers permitting process. So we need just a little more time yet, and so we're bringing this forward to reestablish the public hearing for January.
So moved.
Your motion? Second?
Second?
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. Item H, the CEO General Manager's 2012 compensation. I guess since Jim Grant and myself are the compensation committee, we have sat down and talked, and what we would like to recommend to the board is that Randy receive the same pay he had last year, multiplied plus a 2.8%. I think that's the what our union agreement was, a 2.8% raise, receives the same car allowance and cell phone allowance. And we didn't recommend a bonus. We're not sure that it's appropriate right now with everything that's happening. But this is what we'd like to propose to the board, and I hear a motion, and then we can discuss it.
I'll make the motion, I move that.
And I'll second it.
Okay, discussion?
No, thank you to our chair and vice chair for meeting and reviewing this.
Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. Lost track of where we go to information items. The committee reports. I guess we have the planning committee first. And as soon as I find it, I'll get to that. Jim was not able to come to it. And this was actually one of our more interesting planning committee meetings. Of course, they're all interesting, aren't they, Jim? One thing we dealt with, and we're sure open to any suggestions from the board, but we talked about the legislative forecast. And the election year it's in and everything, it almost looks like it's more of a holding defensive. We didn't have any real want list or program presented. And if the board has any suggestions, everybody's sure open to it.
Yeah, one of the things that we tried to bring forward 2 years ago was a rulemaking to kind of modify the matrix on animal sighting to consider drinking water sources in that. And DNR chose not to bring that rulemaking forward. And now one of the things the governor's office is taking that overall oversight of rulemaking into account for considering all implications of rulemaking. So there's no interest, I guess, at this point on DNR's case to bring that rulemaking forward. So that was the one thing that we felt starting 2 years ago that made some sense, but there's no support for it at this point. So we'll let that go.
I would sure hope we could get a little more aggressive next year if the time is right. Because there's a lot of things legislative we need. Anyway, any other comments on the item 2 was the architecture. Oh, yeah.
I wanted to comment that I had requested to Linda Kenman that there be an effort made to see if some increased privacy protections for utility customers could be crafted into the open records law. And it's my understanding that that's finding some support in the community of utilities and so on. So that might go forward with waterworks support.
Good. Okay, and the second item was the parkitecture, the public reception, and that was last Thursday. And I was shocked, the attendance. It was great. I think it started about 4:30 and the place was almost packed at 4:30. Mm-hmm. We had people from Iowa State. We had just a ton of people. And then I think the one comment I heard from a lot of people going around was the energy that they felt. Because at 6 o'clock, it was open to the public, and it was just like somebody rang a bell and people just started pouring in. And when I left an hour or so after the public, halfway through the public, the parking lot was almost full down to Grand Avenue. And I thought it was one of the most positive things the Waterworks has done in the last several years. It was.
Yeah, we did get a fair number of comments as well. Most of the comments, over half appeared to come from the equestrians. And wanted to make sure the bridle paths were incorporated in some way into whatever design takes place. So we heard that loud and clear through the comments.
But it was all positive. Everybody was really fired up for it.
Right.
And then item 3, the staff kind of surprised us. I think Sue will probably know this issue, is the broken stop boxes and things. And they have gone out, and there are actual insurance companies that sell insurance for this. And they wanted to know if the board was interested in looking into this, and I said, yes, I thought everybody would love to see it. And they're going to see what possibility, maybe you can explain a little bit.
Yeah, there are several utilities, larger ones, that are offering this program. And we're still gathering information. We know that Johnson County, Kansas is considering it at this point in time in the Kansas City area. Louisville, Kentucky, we've talked with them, and they've had a program in place for a couple of years. And it's about 30%, 35% of their customers take that out, voluntary program. And it's priced anywhere, depending on the service line, who owns the service line in various utilities. For us, the customer owns the service line from the water main into the house. So there's a portion of that that's under the street typically. In Louisville's case, the utility owns the owns the service from the main to the meter, which sits right in front of the property. So the customer is buying the protection, service line protection from the meter on into the house. So the discussions that Ted and some of his folks have had is looking at a program that would protect the service line here from the main on into the house, so it's the buried portion of the service line. And so numbers are still just rough ballpark numbers. I think in Louisville's case, it's somewhere between $5 and $6 a month is their program, which again would protect less and would have less expense because they're not paying for any street repair. In our case, there's going to be some amount of street repair involved. So that's all part of what we still need to have discussions and then perhaps put a proposal out and get formal bids back that we can bring back to the board. But it's various ways. We'd looked into this a number of years ago. One approach is to just require it of all customers, and we add it as part of the bill. So in this case, it'd be maybe $5 a month added to a customer's bill. But in Louisville's case, they found that the voluntary program seems to be working for them and the company very satisfactorily. The main thing that the utility needs to do is to share their very marketable customer list because the utility's name goes out along with the company's name on that letterhead. So our customers would know that we're supporting this kind of a program. They use all local plumbers in the course of the project, so seems to be a very positive. I think it might be well received.
I bet it would be. I mean, that's a punch in the nose when your water line breaks and you have to fix it right now. It really can be $3,000 to $5,000 pretty easily.
That wouldn't be something that we would make money doing. We would do the billing basically and
that would be the option that we can, Louisville treats it as a small revenue stream.
Oh, do they?
Because they feel that customer list that they provide is a very marketable product, and so yeah, they get something under $1 million a year. It's about 3 times the size of us, of our system. But I know Ted's had the discussions. Anything more you'd like to just add to the discussion?
Well, a lot of people are starting to do this. A lot of utilities are seeing that the service line maintenance is an important thing. It's another option for customers. So I think it's time for us to take a look at it. Customers are always very receptive to the idea of us repairing their stop box and then putting it on their bill and letting them pay that off. They think that's a great option. But if they have a leak, we don't offer that service. We don't fix leaks. We only fix stop boxes because of the way we work with the city. And this would give them an option potentially for protecting themselves against that leak that can cost
A lot of money.
a and they cover up to $10,000. So it's an interesting program.
It's a regulated activity. It's like an insurance regulatory thing. You have to be filed with the insurance commission.
Mhm.
I think it's worth looking.
I think it's well worth offering to people, I really do. Because that's a pretty big hardship when it happens, for most people.
And if you keep it around $5 or $6,
A month, that's not
if
too
it's
bad.
10, I don't know.
Yeah,
5
yeah,
or
if you,
6 seems to
something.
be.
And particularly in Des Moines, my God, we've got a lot of old water lines. So,
Well, I think that was about all we did on that, and Sue, you had your meeting just recently. Do you want to put that off till next, or do you want to talk about it today?
Well, I think we've covered everything.
That's what I think so too. Okay. I usually do that.
I'll give you a
you
few-
mentioned in that meeting, one thing I remember you talking about is that on the budget planning and all that, if we could be involved sooner, that's more helpful to us. And I guess I'd like to stress that as well. I'm interested in that, especially when, I mean, we're kind of responsible for the budget. So I'd like to see it a little sooner, have a little more input into it maybe, if that's possible in the future.
Graham, did you have something?
I was going to bring up a new topic. I was going to give you a little botanical garden update.
I was going to bring that up.
Okay.
And would you want to tell us about the botanical center?
Sure. And I may have related some of this to you. The Botanical Garden has hired a new CEO and president. She's on the ground now. The board also approved White's as the construction manager. And so, and construction will consist of a couple of things. There'll be actual construction to the facility, to the building and the dome and that sort of thing. But then there'll also be a lot of construction that involves the gardens after the street is closed and those sorts of things. All of that appears to be on schedule. The one thing that I will continue to remind us and the staff is one of the pieces that we will have, and I think we have a strong interest in, are the programming aspects as it has to do with water. I think this is a great opportunity to educate the community about water uses, not only in gardens, but how we operate here as a public venue. And as part of our ongoing efforts there, that's one of the things that's in the agreement, is that Waterworks will have that visibility and that opportunity, including being part of that annual lecture series that is partially funded by DuPont. And so water will continue, it will always have a role there, and we just need to have that in the back of our heads as this thing gets closer to opening in 13 or 14. So the good news is they continue to raise the money they need. Matter of fact, I think they're going to increase their goal, which is an odd thing to do in this community, but I think they're going to reach their 10 million and are at the point of considering whether 11 or 12 to expand the project. So.
Good for them.
Oh, wow, that's great. Thank you, Graham. I guess we go to the CEO and general manager's comment.
Yes, I'd like to introduce John Newman and Jason Bumgardner are here. Back in October, the IT Joint City and Board Subcommittee on IT met and heard a summary from those two gentlemen, which talked about, I think, about three main projects, initiatives that really started maybe even before that subcommittee met. But I think the feeling coming out of that was that having a brief 5-10 minute summary presented by those two gentlemen to talk about those projects would be, the board would find that interesting. So if they'd like to step up to the lectern and kind of give that summary, that would be great.
Well, we started and had several meetings where we got together and were talking about things that we could do together, joint types of projects. We really narrowed it down to three main initiatives to start in 2012. The first one is a project that will bring the two core networks together. All of our infrastructure, all of our fiber, all of our connections that we have throughout our utility and our campus. And we want to merge that with the city's network as well. The city has a network just like us. They've got fiber in the ground. They've got different locations that are wired into their system. And what we're proposing to do is merge the two systems so that basically any place where the city has infrastructure, we would be able to place Des Moines Waterworks equipment, and anywhere that the Des Moines Waterworks has infrastructure, we'd be able to place city equipment. This would allow us to really take advantage of any of the facilities that the city has for us to use for disaster recovery, expanded space, whatever type of future project we might want to do jointly. This merger of the two networks, or this combination of the two networks, would allow us to accommodate that. The second project is a similar project, but it's focused on the wireless infrastructure. The city also has a pretty extensive wireless infrastructure in place at various locations, and the Waterworks has as well on our campus and at some of our locations. Again, this would allow us to expand the footprint of that wireless network and allow us to connect our equipment wirelessly through the city's facilities. One way that we might use that, as a specific example, would be for our meter reading system. Our meter reading system right now relies on cellular communication. We have a series of data collectors that are placed throughout the city, and the meter units call into those collectors, and those collectors then send the information back to us so we can perform our billing function. What we would potentially be able to do, and whenever it was possible, would be to utilize the city's wireless network for that transport rather than cellular communication. So we could potentially have an opportunity to reduce our cellular data expenses. The city has wireless infrastructure in places like fire departments, things like that, and that's oftentimes where we will place that kind of infrastructure. So we have the potential. We're going to examine that. We're going to look at how we can utilize that network to save ourselves some money. The third idea that we came up with was related to the internet. The city just this year, I think, did a rather large expansion of their internet capacity. We ourselves here at the Waterworks were also planning for an expansion of our internet capacity at the same time. But we've decided that with the merger of the networks, that would also allow us to potentially utilize the city's internet connection for some of our traffic. They've indicated that they have the bandwidth available. We can allocate a certain amount of space and speed to the Waterworks, and that again could potentially save us from having to pay for that internet expense ourselves. Finally, we did actually identify one other one that's not nearly as well articulated as the three that we just talked about, but it's been my intention since I started here in 2008 to expand on our disaster recovery capabilities and put additional backup systems in place for us to have an added amount of security for our data and our information and our systems. Typically, when I started that project, I was looking at some rented space with there's several providers that will rent you rack space or data center space where you can place backup systems, and those are typically billed out by the square footage or by the power that you draw or some other measure. But we never got to the point where we actually costed any of that out. But with the expansion onto the city network, that would allow us basically to use any of their data centers as a backup site for our site. So instead of having to go out to someplace like Light Edge or Rackspace or one of the other providers that provides that kind of service, we would instead be able to take our systems and house them in the data center, in one of the city's data centers. Again, that's an example, a pretty good example of a future project that would be enabled by us doing these first series of network consolidation projects. That's the ones that we came up with. Those are the ones that we're going to focus on in 2012. We've already budgeted for the expansion. The network expansion's already been put in the budget for next year. It was already approved for next year, so we'll be kicking that off right after the first of the year. Once the network expansion's in place, we'll move on to the wireless and internet and other projects to follow. So,
Randy, can I say something? This board originally started this, let's see, personnel, finance, and IT. We set a goal this year of collaboration with the city to save money, to provide better services, just to get the even better water, cheaper and more efficiently. And this is one of the things that's come from it and will continue.
Mm-hmm.
So that, people that don't know where this came from.
Sure.
That's kind of the history.
Yeah, I think Jason and John will continue to talk and meet periodically as things make sense. Feel free, I guess, if anybody has any board members have other questions or a question for John, feel free, by all means.
I think it's the important thing is this is the first group to report out, and the reason is because they started their work a long time ago. So,
And they had you driving them.
No, that had nothing to do with it, believe me.
it's true, Mike Mathis and I had been already meeting on a monthly basis with county CIO and the CIO schools to sort of talk about this exact kind of project. So it was not a new idea for us to collaborate. It's something we were already looking for ways to do, and we finally, I think we finally landed on something that we can accomplish.
And you are presenting this to the city, I understand, is that correct? When we had our meeting about a month ago, we talked about rolling this out, not only here, but at the city. The reason I'm asking is I had a conversation with the mayor today, and he wanted to know where we were on the projects, and I said, it's on our agenda today. So will the city council also be made aware of this?
Yeah, we typically, we could schedule this as one of our workshop items. We just had the architecture plan presented. We usually have those at 7:30 on Monday mornings, but we could certainly do the same thing.
And could you inform the boards?
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you, Jason.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Jason.
Thanks.
And John, thank you as well. Okay, continuing on, our winter weather has been kind of interesting. One of the things that's an immediate initial challenge for our water production team is dealing with what they call slush ice. Before the river freezes over, there's usually floating ice and ice crystals in the water that will adhere to our bar screens on our river intakes and can plug up those river intakes until the river ice is over. Well, the raccoon, and typically when that happens, it happens on the Raccoon first, and we can shift to the Des Moines River. That was the case this year. And we asked the city, and they're leaving the flashboards up on Center Street Dam to provide a little deeper water back at the Prospect Park Des Moines River intake. So that all worked fine, and then of course the weather warmed up here for us, and that a little bit of ice melted, and so we're dealing with some slush ice again on the Raccoon. But fortunately, we're not having the same problem on both rivers at the same time, because otherwise it becomes a real maintenance issue and challenge for our water production team. The flooding station is another project that the board awarded here a couple of months ago, and that work is nearing completion. Contractor's going to finish that up, and Our water production folks are rebuilding the motors, or not the motors, but the pumps that are in that flooding station, along with the contractor. So we're getting some new screens that project out from on the riverside of the intake. Those should be installed next week by the contractor, and then our folks will get the pump installed, and we can pump water back to the recharge ponds and keep those full once again.
Those are the pictures you sent us.
Correct. So they, water's down, and it appears to me just by eyeball about a foot and a half in the recharge pond. So it's not drained them completely for this better than a month that they've been down. We received a formal letter from FEMA after the Finance and Audit meeting on Friday. Received it Monday, I believe it was, formally rejecting our appeal. So we're going to proceed with the next appeal process step, which will take it to FEMA in Washington. And we will utilize all of the congressional contacts as well as we had talked about on that Finance and Audit meeting on Friday.
Could we be copied in on the formal letter that would go to our congressional leadership so that we know that they have been made aware of it? And if you could copy the board members so then we can also contact them on behalf of the board.
Sure.
That's a good idea.
Okay, so we'll focus that appeal, like Gary had mentioned, likely on those 3 projects that we have completed and on the ground, and we're certainly working with legal counsel on this whole process as well. So that will continue. One of the kind of national water discussion occurred, I don't know if it was yesterday or certainly within the last week, on the Dr. Oz show. And so in the event you might hear something, I got a chance to look at what they had posted on his website, and they were talking about 4 contaminants. Fortunately, none of which are an issue for us, but perchlorate being one, and EPA will be regulating perchlorate fairly soon. It's a predominant rocket fuel contaminant. So California is an issue, but the small community of Hills, Iowa had a perchlorate issue. And that's a community that doesn't have a community water system. They're all individual wells. But several of the individual wells were contaminated by perchlorate, thinking from 4th of July fireworks. So, which is one of the other sources of perchlorate. Talked about Chrom 6. Chromium 6 is a non-regulated contaminant. Total chromium is. But chromium 6 is also on EPA's radar for regulation. And so we've done some just very preliminary testing, and our Saylorville plant and Fleur plants are very low. They're down in the 0.04 to 0.23 parts per billion range. And the McMullen was order magnitude higher, 2.6 parts per billion. Now, the current health standard for total chrome is 100 parts per billion. But California has set a goal for Chrom 6 standard that would be down into 0.02 parts per billion, which would be 20 parts per trillion. So that again, EPA has got studies underway to decide if they are going to regulate Chrom 6, but that's one of the contaminants that's out receiving some national news. Then the other 2 compounds that were covered in the Dr. Oz show were lead and arsenic. And we report lead and arsenic in the Consumer Confidence Report each year, and in our system, fortunately, lead is into the non-detectable to a very low range. So all of our customers, wholesale customers included, who receive our water are well below the 15 parts per billion standard. And then arsenic is typically a groundwater well supply contaminant. Lime softening would take it out if indeed we had an arsenic issue. But fortunately, we do not. It's a very low concentration. So that was on the Dr. Oz show, and it seems to get a lot of viewers. And with social media nowadays, it can pass along a lot of information very quickly. We have on main breaks, just to report, we're at roughly 297 main breaks so far for the year.
For the year so far?
For the year so far, and that compares with, we had budgeted for the year roughly 271 main breaks. So we're up about 10% over what our estimate was, but our estimate, frankly, was above by 10% what the last 3 years average was, because we've been in the 240 to 250 range. So this year we'll end up on the high side on the main break front, which then translate to a little bit higher on the cost of distribution repairs. It's largely just due to main break repairs. And then one of the things that our laboratory and water production tracked as well is disinfection byproducts rule. 2012 is the start of a modification on how we have to report our disinfection byproducts, trihalomethanes being the predominant compound that's being tracked. But it used to be that you'd take your samples for disinfection byproducts and then average them and report that. You had to be below the health standard. Now we have to report on each location. So they're calling it a locational running average. Our laboratory did a system study, which was required here 2 years ago, and that all came out very well in our favor, and so we do not have to do a follow-up testing for that until 2015. But we will continue. We do have yearly requirements for disinfection byproducts testing. And again, our lime softening and how we feed just as low a quantity of chlorine that we have to really contributes to that lower level of trihalomethanes concentration in our system. So that's pretty well it on the operational front. Want to hand out?
Randy,
Yes.
one thing, could you maybe send out an email a couple days before you have your quarterly retiree meeting?
Yes.
And maybe if, some board members who are not doing something, they could pop in and chat.
Yes, we did have a quarterly retiree meeting, and notes are attached here in the packet.
When was the last one?
We just had it, what was it, about 4 weeks ago. Primary thing was to inform them about the COLA decision, and then also on insurance signups, because it's year end, in case they are going to make any changes. We cover that with that particular meeting. And we had good attendance. We had 13 or 15 retirees attend that meeting. Handed out the draft agendas for the January meeting. And for planning, we want to provide our really first EAM quarterly update to the board. On planning, we'll focus on just the elements in the model that we're developing. And then we also have it on for finance and audit, but to really focus on where we're at with budget on that project. But then thought it'd be appropriate for planning to review our strategic plan status, the 2010-2012 strategic plan status. And then depending on where we're at, we've got tentative here for the joint Southwest feeder and storage project. West Des Moines has indicated they have a developer ready to develop some land along the Southwest connector south of Highway 5. And they want to take water from our Army Post Road feeder main to the south side of the highway. We know also that Norwalk has some interest in having a second connection to us. And then coming is poised for some amount of growth. Isn't going to take too much before they exceed what they can draw through the coming, or the Norwalk system. So we're working with West Des Moines right currently to make that a joint project, feeder main, storage tank, pump station project. So that may be ready or may get pushed back a month. So that's planning. And then on the finance and audit, Greenfield Plaza Sewer District, and we serve Greenfield Plaza under a total service agreement, has asked if we would certify liens on their behalf for the sewer district, and so we're going to bring an agreement forward to make that happen to finance and audit. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the EAM quarterly update for finance and audit as well. So those are the proposed topics from those committees. If there's
Randy,
anything
can
else.
we meet afterwards, and Leslie, on the date of the finance meeting? I'd like to see if we can make a change in the date of the finance meeting.
Okay.
Sure. And then lastly, I guess, I don't know that viewers and our customers necessarily know that the Board of Trustees here serve on a volunteer basis on this board without compensation, and we certainly want to recognize the board for your service, and I certainly appreciate and thank you for your service this year. That's all I have.
That's about it. Anybody else have any comments? Guess everybody have a good, safe holiday.
Great,
Yes, very
thank
much
you.
so.
That's all. Thank you. Thank you.